slight misnomer, because this is meant to be how to succeed at film festivals, and that is basically make a very good film. That's it. End of conversation.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I suppose as well, like making a good film is it seems like such a flimsy, throwaway comment.
Yeah.
But it's true. I mean, you can be technically competent. That's the first step. But then you've got to have an execution of narrative that's interesting.
Yeah.
And I think when we're looking at films as a company, sometimes we take films on that we go, look, this isn't a narrative that's going to blow anyone's mind. It's nothing new, but it's well put together. It's fun, or it's easy to program, or it's gentle. It's something that those kind of smaller festivals, or kind of more audience-led festivals would appreciate. And I think that's the important thing. Is it's good film is so subjective, because what people would think is an amazing film, I might watch and go, with my festival mind, go, I'd find it really tough to send it to that territory because they don't like ultra violence, or I'd find it hard to send it to that type of festival because it's just so out there for them. And I think that when you're a filmmaker and you're in the midst of it, you don't necessarily look outwards, because you're like this with your film. You're like, I'm in my film, I know my film inside out. And sometimes it's hard to actually kind of look to the circuit as essentially a piece of content, which is what you are.
Yeah.
In the purest form, you are a piece of content that you're trying to ship around and get people to put in their bigger lineup of content. Which sounds really clinical, but that's kind of what you set yourself up for.
It was quite fascinating. So before doing this, so I contacted all the judges and said I was going to do this, and said, can you just give me a list of the main things that you look for, and there were definitely things in there that I wouldn't have put down. And that I wouldn't have considered. That obviously, there wasn't really the industry judges and the cinema goers tended to say the same things, but there were certainly some things that quite a few people picked up on that I've never really considered. There were some things that were everybody said, and I think they'll probably become obvious. I think the first one that everybody said was definitely casting. I think casting is one of those strange things. I think it's slightly odd as somebody, as a filmmaker who's been involved in the casting process for other people as well. It's that odd thing of, until running a film festival, I don't think I'd appreciated how important casting was. We had a great film last year. I actually saw it not long after our festival. It wasn't accepted into the festival, but not long after the festival, I saw it on Amazon Prime. It was a British movie. Really couldn't fault it. Very well written. The leads were really charismatic and engaging, very well directed, high production standards. I think it was quite low budget, but it's one of those films that you didn't notice that it was low budget. But about half of the way in, there was an actress who turned up for 2 scenes maybe, and I hate to be harsh, but she was awful. That's it. We can't show it because it's a perfect example, that whole thing of being willing to stand up in front of a film and present it. I certainly I would have been like, oh god, don't want to look at that point. And I think we find with a lot of the films that we get, I find it quite sad that you've gone to so much time and effort on a great script, great directing, productions, everything, and then you just only take you might have a really good cast, but it only takes one weak actor to just make you go, urgh.
And I will say, we give constructive feedback / criticism to every film, irrespective if we are interested in taking it on or not. And sometimes I will say, I feel like you've made a misstep with the casting. And you know what? 9 times out of 10, the filmmaker comes back and goes, completely agree.
Oh, really? Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. And I find, it's good. Look, we're a very honest company, and that's what we're known for. And it's because we don't want to sell a dream. We don't want to take someone's money willy-nilly. But when we're bold enough to say that, sometimes we've taken films on knowing that. And our role is to say to a filmmaker, look, these are the hurdles that you have. but your film is a really interesting story and it's really well put together. It's just we're flagging these up because they may be an issue with some programmers, but for others it might be less of an issue, but just letting you know. And they appreciate it. And I think sometimes it can surprise you that even though a performance is maybe subpar, if the story can overcome that, then it can be the, you know, it can not be the massive spanner in the works as it was before. But it's very rare because you have to get an audience on board, and sometimes a really poor performance is the one thing that takes you out of it. That actually, you know, that's just, it's the same as having, you know, a very on the nose exposition heavy script. It clang.
I don't, you know, I don't think it helps that, you know, just in the big blockbuster world, we regularly see terrible performances in various things, and people kind of use that as a reference point. But the trouble is, you know, I'm trying to think of an example. Keanu Reeves in Dracula, you know, he's got terrible English accent, and sorry, you know, Keanu, not that he's watching, but Keanu, I love you, you're great, but you know, I'm sure he'll be the first one to admit that, you know, it's, you know, his accent is just takes you out of it. But people don't care because, you know, it's a Francis Ford Coppola movie. You know, Gary Oldman's amazing. He's beautiful sets and things. You've got a little, you know, 5-minute, no-budget short film. You've got nowhere to hide. So everything gets picked up on. So it's one of those things. It probably is. Yeah, you know, it probably is the most common reason that things don't end up at the festival. It's just, you know, the odd bits of poor bit of casting, and it's hard because I know that people, especially on a budget, you know, they'll try and get, you know, a friend or whatever. It's quite interesting. We just did the Satisfied Eye magazine, for which we interviewed yourself and a few, you know, previous alumni, and it was quite interesting to see that a lot of the people have gone on to really good success. Just the incredible lengths they took in the casting processes, you know, more than I'd ever do. The director of A Kiss last year was set in like a camp for immigrants, for young immigrants, and none of them were actors. So you'd immediately think, well, you know, that's going to be a problem. Well, they spent months, you know, actually getting acting coaches to teach these, you know, immigrants, because they wanted it to be real, to teach them how to act. And, you know, that's going to the next level. And I think Fauve, Jeremy Fauve was the Oscar nominee last year, I think it was. You know, he was saying how they spent ages, you know, casting, trying to find these two young kids, but, you know, they went kind of the typical approach and drama school-y kind of thing, and they were just all too proper, and then had to go the more real approach, trying to find street kids, and then they were watching them during the casting process to see how they actually engaged outside the actual casting room. And, you know, it's just one of those places that you can't hide. You can't, you know, it's fascinating. And it's certainly, you know, in anything that I make in future, I think, you know, I've probably been a bit lazy when it comes to the casting process, but now, you know, I certainly never would be. But having said that, having run a film festival, I think I've said this to you before, I watch so many films now where I just think I might as well give up, because I could live another 100 years, and there's, you know, these 17-year-old filmmakers making these films that I just think, yeah, you know, I could, you know, they could extend my life another, you know, century, and I'd still never make a film that good. So the talent out there is incredible. I'm trying to, let me have a look at my list to see what the next thing on the list is. Oh, festival geocaching. That was the only way that that we could kind of explain it. I don't know if that made any sense. You know how people go and kind of, when they go walking, they collect like GPS points and stuff like that. And there seem to be people who go out there and just sweep up laurels and trophies and
okay. I've not looked at that. I mean, I kind of looking at the term geocaching in a modern day context, as in like right now. Has like a different connotation in terms of its festivals who are limiting the reach of their festival because it is online. So that's like geofencing, geotagging, geocaching. I think you will get a lot of filmmakers who are laurel hunters. They literally just want a laurel for their film, and they'll go to the more, you know, easily accessible festival, whether that be it's a few years under its belt, so therefore it's less fussy about content that they receive, but also they generally tend to be the cheaper ones to submit to. It's not great. I mean, I kind of feel like it kind of cheapens what some of the harder working festivals are actually trying to achieve. And we always say to filmmakers, look, it's better to have a few really strong, well-known festivals on your poster than to have, like, 30 odd laurels that, as soon as you lean in closer, they are just nondescript or kind of monthly events, or just they don't mean anything, or you've got like 10 laurels from one film festival. It just kind of cheapens the film.
We tend to get almost suspicious of a film that just turns up with lots and lots of, you see it on Film Freeway, lots of, you have the film poster on Film Freeway, and so many of them you can't actually see the poster, it's just full of laurels, and we're always immediately suspicious of those, because generally those laurels aren't necessarily from as you say, the bigger, stronger festivals. And I've been there myself. I'm not too ashamed to admit that I've made, I've worked on some absolutely awful films in the past. I really have, and I'm not just blaming other people. Things that I've written. So the screenwriter me was terrible, and they've gone on to win awards, and that kind of invalidates that festival for me. And I think when you asked me the Q&A when we first met, I think I mentioned the fact that I used to submit screenplays to film festivals, just because it was cheaper than getting readers' reports. You send it into a festival, they give you feedback, and it's a lot cheaper. And I'd become a semi-finalist and a quarter-finalist with a script that I knew was seriously underdeveloped. So that there are a lot of festivals out there that I don't quite understand the process, but the quality control isn't very much there. So whenever we see films that are just loaded with laurels, we immediately think, well, have they just gone to all the really low-level festivals and just and that is slightly disingenuous, because we do get films that are brilliant that have got loads and loads of laurels. Some people do genuinely just have a brilliant film that wins loads of awards, but we do, I don't know if everybody does this, but I look what the festivals, I've got one, I'm not going to show you what it is. On my window ledge, there is a trophy from a festival that I've won a Best Film Award, and it's a festival that I really shouldn't have won Best Film at. It's a not very good film, and so if I see that laurel on a poster, I'm immediately
that's what I mean. Like, the festival circuit, even though it's sprawling and forever growing and increasing, people don't forget. Like, as a filmmaker, if you've had a great experience at a festival, you'll remember it. If you had a shit experience, you'll remember it. If you run a festival and you see a film has screened at another festival that maybe you're not a big fan of because of their ethics or their content or how they run their festival, it sticks. And I think it's hard because filmmakers kind of presume, well, a laurel's a laurel and it makes my film stand out. Yeah, it makes your film stand out, so therefore make those laurels count. Because we do it. Like, if we say to someone, where have you previously been selected for, and they give us, we've been screened here, and we're like, okay, out of the 20, probably 4 of them are good. The rest of them are just neither here nor there. They're kind of, and we are forever saying to filmmakers, your film's stronger than that. Your film should be aiming higher. Like, why have you not considered this? Which we often find that filmmakers either go really high to the really kind of tough festivals to get into that are really oversubscribed, or Premier led and tastemaker festivals, and then go, blitzed on my budget, or just go really, really low, and they miss out that middle section, which is the most fruitful. So I mean, you're right, it looks disingenuous, and I think any filmmaker, when they're submitting to a festival, should understand why they're submitting there. And it can be so simple as, my mate got a screen there last year and he said it was great. Or my other mate kind of didn't get selected, but she still went and said it was a really strong program. They're the reasons to submit, not because it's free, not because it's cheap, not because you're just trying to find a laurel. There, unfortunately, again, because there's no regulatory body, there are festivals out there that are just laurel mills. You pay, you get a laurel, you win an award, and that's it. The thing is, filmmakers still submit to it, so that's why they exist.
They just keep on going.
Yeah.
I've actually got, so this is one of the emails that I've got. It says, could you give me, it's actually a segue into the next one. Could you give me a waiver? I've picked up awards at over 100 festivals, have a massive social media following, and could do your festival a lot of good. You know, we get messages like that all the time. And you know, it's so just arrogant. The fact that, you know, but you're not doing our festival a lot of good, because, you know, your film's probably stale as well, really, in terms of the fact that you've won so many awards.
There's a level of arrogance, and it's really off-putting.
Yeah.
Because look, I understand filmmakers don't have a lot of money, but that's even more reason to look at your budget and make where you submit count, because it will dictate which level of festival you submit to. If you've only got 200 quid to spend submission fees, don't submit to a festival that's 80 quid, because you're going to leave yourself with very little in the kitty. So when it annoys me, because our rule of thumb is, if a festival approaches us for a client's film and says, I've heard about your film, or I saw it here, or I've seen it on the website, I'd like to take a look at it. Our rule of thumb is, if they are requesting it, it should be a waiver.
Yeah.
Because they are reaching out for us to kind of say, we're interested in content. There's no kind of, there's no guarantees. You're putting it literally in front of them so they can say yes or no, or maybe. When a filmmaker blitzes festivals and asking for a waiver, I'm not going to say it doesn't work, but what you'll probably find is it will either be really reluctantly, or a festival will ask you more questions, or they just won't exist. They won't respond, because I think it's rude to ask for it. And I understand extenuating circumstances negates that sometimes people should have a waiver. It generally tends to be kind of certain countries of production where it's harder to get money in and out of the country. It might be a particular category. But festivals now are doing everything they can to accommodate for that. So you'll have festivals that will have cheaper categories because it taps into a particular theme, or it taps into an eligibility that maybe is underrepresented. They're trying to do everything they can, but at the same time, I know there are festivals that charge a lot of money, and that's because they are bigger, prolific festivals, but it should always be about why you're submitting there. So for filmmakers to ask for waivers, I find it rude, and it also kind of flags up that they don't understand how hard it is to run a film festival. A film festival doesn't necessarily run at a profit. It's generally run to just, keep the lights on, get everything ticking over. But I think waivers are, I think it's just rude for a filmmaker to demand them, but also to kind of say, we can do more for you. If that were the case, you would, there would be a pre-existing relationship with that festival. It wouldn't be like hey, this is transactional. It would be I'm really interested in your festival and I'd love to submit. And then you submit, and then you build that relationship, and then you're alumni. But there's kind of two sides to it. There's the one side of it, we do get a lot of waiver. I think every festival gets a lot of waiver requests. The first one is, it does, we get so many where it is literally, can I have a waiver? That's it. Don't tell us anything about them, the film, or anything like that. I will at least read it if they tell us, give us some background. And, I don't know if we have, I don't think we have ever actually given a waiver. I may be wrong, even after you've given us the information. But if somebody doesn't tell us anything, just says, give me a waiver, then that's it. That's just delete. But I think also probably filmmakers don't, as you say, realise that there are lots of countries like Iran that are unable to pay. So every film festival, we got 100 waiver requests from Iran this year that we know. And the thing is, I think they probably tend to be a bit more knowledgeable and savvy about the situation. So they do, give you a long reason explaining what the film's about, why they struggle, why they find it so hard to get into festivals. And, we have actually, I think, probably not the first year, but certainly last year and this year, we've screened Iranian films that have had waivers. But that's because we're trying to help somebody who, wouldn't be able to get into festivals otherwise. We're the same. I mean, we've had some amazing Iranian films sent our way, but we can't, because they're in a position where they can't get money in and out of the country, and we can't receive money as a company from them. So we can give them guidance, but we can't kind of take them on, and that's a shame. And that's something, and I know that was in a group that we're both involved in, that kind of got flagged up because someone was like, is this a scam?
Yeah,
And
I
we're
know.
like, no,
That's
actually,
yeah.
yeah, you should know about this.
Yeah,
This is something that is a recurring issue, and not because it's a scam, but because it's actuality. Like, this does happen, and it's something that festivals should factor in. Now, there are a lot of festivals that don't like giving out a waiver, and they'll be upfront about it. That's fine. But, you know, if you're looking for strong content that's maybe coming from outside of your country of origin for your festival, you have to factor that in. But I think, you know, waivers are tricky because there is that classic adage, you don't ask, you don't get. Right? Completely get that. But if you're going to ask, put it into context, because I can tell you now the amount of programmers that get so pissed off when it's a copy and paste job.
Yeah.
And like, literally what the filmmaker is saying is, yeah, I've run out of money because I've spent it on other festivals, so can I have a waiver?
Yeah, which makes you feel really good, because it makes you realise you're really, you know, all the way down the pecking order. It's just the other thing as well. It's, you know, that's one of the things that I do tend to just delete, is when a filmmaker says, you know, this film is shot on a, you know, low budget, you know, we've run out of money. And it's like, well, this is your first lesson in the business of film, because you don't buy a house if you can't afford furniture, or buy a car if you can't afford petrol. You know, you make sure you make your film for a little, because you don't have a film without a festival. So, you know, the festival
budget, it comes down to budget. And I think it's frustrating. Yeah, because you just, what's the point of making a film if you're not going to show it off?
Yeah, absolutely.
And, you know, the amount of filmmakers that are like, oh, I just don't want to whack it on Vimeo or YouTube. And you're like, yeah, exactly. So what are you going to do? You're going to go to the circuit. Have you got the money for it? I haven't got that much. It doesn't matter if you haven't got much, as long as you know what you've got, because that will help you figure out where to spend that money. And it's not as expensive as people always presume. Like, I've done this for 16 years now, so I've seen so many different changes. How many festivals exist is the first step, but how much it is actually, it's cheaper now. And I know a lot of filmmakers will be like, but it's expensive. Like, no, it's expensive because you're probably spending your money unwisely. But if I were to say, like, back then, like 10 years ago, it was $50 a pop. But that's because less people were making film, there were less festivals. So, you know, you've actually got a lot more to play with. The term early bird deadline is so well known amongst filmmakers now, because it is indicative of that's a cheaper deadline. Or they'll do a short week where, you know, it's free, or anything like that. You have it, like, filmmakers have it a lot easier now in terms of cost. But what I would say is that they're quite easily flummoxed by how many festivals there are. And they still submit to those bigger festivals that maybe just don't suit that particular project.
Just throwing money away. It is hard. The next one probably might seem slightly minor and random, but I think it kind of fits in with what you were saying earlier about festivals and festival directors just kind of looking for a reason. When you're looking at so many films, you're just looking for the first reason just to, you know, get rid of it. And it's subtitles, which, you know, I can kind of see why quite a few of our judges mentioned that. We had one this year, which was a really, really great, I would have loved to have screened it because it was a comedy, and we didn't get many comedies this year. It was a great Spanish comedy, but the subtitles, not only were they out of sync, you know, the what do you call it? The translation wasn't very good. And, you know, if we were a bigger organization, had a bigger team, had a budget, we would have contacted them and said, please, you know, we love your film, resubmit it with better subtitles. But we don't have the time when you're looking at so many films. So once again, it's just an immediate, no, sorry, we don't have time for that. And the other thing is that something I remember from one of the screenings last year, which I think is why it's that kind of thing of always take care of the small things. I remember last year, one of the screenings at the festival, it was, you know, I can't actually remember the typo, but it was a really minor typo in subtitles. You know, it was probably something like, you know, it should have said fate and it said fat, just randomly. And somebody in the audience down there tittered at seeing that. So that could have been it was a drama, so it could be the only reason they tittered. And you just see the entire audience just goes, huh? And because of that one tiny little thing, you've lost the audience. The audience
Yeah.
is gone. They've been taken out of the moment. And as a filmmaker, that would drive me crazy. So
Yeah, we see it all the time. And I think, you know, first of all, I do admire the filmmakers who do create subtitles, but it is often poorly done.
yeah,
And the amount of times that when we give feedback, we're saying to them, like, just, you know, syntax and grammatical errors and just, you know, like spelling errors. It does, because the thing is, when you're watching a subtitled film, you're relying not just on the image, but the text being there for you. So it is like it's a barrier. And if that barrier is down and it's all well and it reads well, you're completely, it's part and parcel of
yeah,
it.
it's almost subliminal.
Yeah, but when it is, like, when it clangs, it really just makes you kind of go, what? And you're right, it takes you out of it. And it's interesting, because we've gotten into the habit now of asking our clients when they join for a time-coded dialogue list.
Yeah.
Because the amount of festivals kind of in European countries or kind of Asian territories where they kind of need to subtitle it either in their native language or because they want to have it so they can kind of subtitle it into English, but like in an English way that, you know, somebody who English isn't their first language would understand. And the art of subtitling is a whole thing into itself, because sometimes if you're trying to translate something into another language, there's so much to incorporate, such as like the vernacular. Is it colloquial? Is it slang? Is it, you know, is it astute? It's almost essentially rewriting the script, but based on watching the story and having the original kind of context and then putting it into another language. And sometimes you can tell it hasn't worked, which is a shame. Because if you think about how many times have we been in a situation where we hear a long piece of kind of, you know, language and it just comes out as like a few words. And sometimes you kind of go, that's because there is a reason for that kind of shortening, or because the way that the English say an expression is very different to the way a Spanish person would, or an Italian or a Japanese person. So this idea that we have is, well, if we get everyone to translate their language at the beginning, it means that when we present it to a festival, they have it as written.
Great idea, yeah.
And a lot of these kind of international festivals will provide the kind of translation for you, because they want it to be good. They want it to be able to sit in front of an audience in their hometown and have no one snigger, or have no one kind of go, what does that mean? You know, and it's quite interesting to see how many filmmakers don't actually know the concept of the time-coded dialogue list, and how actually fruitful it can be. It's a pain in the ass to do, because you're writing the time code in and out of every line of dialogue in your film. But when a German festival says, we've got a time-coded dialogue list, we'll do the translation, you can go, yeah, here you go.
Yeah.
Whereas sometimes a filmmaker will be like, what's a time-coded dialogue list? And when do they need it? And we're like, they need it like now. So that's why we're kind of always, you know, at the beginning, we're like, look, this is a pain, but honestly, once you have it, it's done you for the rest of your circuit. Because at the end, that festival will be like, here's your SRT file of the German translation. You're like, great. So when I have a next German screening and they need it, we can say, yeah, there's already been done. Here you go. But it frustrates us, because sometimes there are certain companies that kind of provide English translation to international filmmakers, and it's just not good. Like, and it can be a deciding factor.
Yeah, and it's difficult as well, because, you know, I'm assuming a lot of people actually don't realise there's a problem with their subtitles. If you know, if
exactly,
it's not your native language, you're relying on that company. So it is very, very difficult. The next one on the list is probably one of the most obvious, and you've kind of referenced it already. It's openings. Yeah, exactly. Because that whole thing is like a first date, isn't it? It's like, you know, if you go, if you're sitting on a date, waiting in a restaurant, and somebody turns up, you know, dressed as a hobo, you know, they have got to be the most amazing conversationist ever to kind of win you back. And it's the same with a film. If you're just waiting for hours for it to kind of kick in, and I think it's hard, because as a filmmaker, you're just thinking about your film. You're not thinking about the audience or anything like that. But, you know, as judges and as a festival director, you know, sometimes you're watching literally dozens of films in a day. So, you know, there are times when, you know, you're just watching one after the other after the other. So if something's taken age just to start, it's just like, please come on. And the worst offender actually kind of links back to the laurels. We're seeing more and more of this. There's quite a few of them that will open up with screens of laurels.
The laurels, yeah.
No.
I've seen that at a festival before, and I just felt really embarrassed because it's your film should speak for itself.
Yeah.
Like I as an audience member, you've got to remember that, you know, every audience member in a festival isn't necessarily a filmmaker. So, you know, the majority of them are, but for the main part, they're not. So you're asking somebody who isn't a filmmaker, knows nothing about film festivals, to sit there and kind of go, what are these things on screen? Like they're different, and they're not long enough for me to read. And, you know, does this mean anything? And I remember seeing one where I think it had about 4 screens of just full of laurels, like literally blitzing. And I was like, but that you've obviously added that as you've gone through your journey. So you've actually extended the length of your film. And then, yeah, it's only like, what, 5 seconds, but you kind of go, really? I think we often see short films that are shot like a feature.
Yeah.
So, and that's not necessarily to do with just the execution of narrative, or, you know, the tone or overarching stories that we're seeing. It's about the presentation, and sometimes those kind of excessively long leading credits, unless you can filter them in to the presentation of the story.
Yeah. Like,
I shouldn't have to watch a minute and a half of leading credits, because you've got credits at the end. Like, it's a little bit overzealous. Like, it just kind of smacks of arrogance. And I'm not going to say that every short film I've seen with leading credits is like that, but it does make you kind of wonder, but why? Why can't you just drop me in the story? Why do I have to see 30 seconds of black screens with title credits on there before I get to anything? I've seen it before where there's been no sound. Like, I literally have watched a minute where it's just title, and I've gone, but why? Like, there was no reason to, like, just drop me in it, just drop me in the story, hit the ground running, because that is what is a sign of a film that will grab a programmer. And I'm not saying it has to be high octane, that it has to be an action, or it has to be, you know, bangs and clashes galore. It just needs to drop us in the story, and that's not the biggest ask, because your story is a story. It's just drop us in at the point where it makes sense for us to join. I've seen films before where we've taken like 6-7 minutes of a 15-minute film to actually kind of be presented with what it's about.
It's the film,
and that's because it had long leading credits with a dark screen, no sound, and then when we get to it, it's kind of, you know, it's establishing shot after establishing shot after establishing shot after establishing shot, and then some more credits, and then you're just like, just give me something. Now, we watch everything through to the end, because we have to give feedback, and we all kind of say, look, here is the reason we are saying no. It's because blah 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 blah, or this is the reason we really want your film, because XYZ. We do that because we want to be able to give something back to a filmmaker so they understand the context, they understand why we're saying yes or no. Programmer doesn't have to do that. A programmer can just go, no, 6 minutes, I've got nothing. 7 minutes, still got nothing. No, they're lucky they've got me this long to watch that amount. And they don't have to give feedback, which is why, and it's part of a big conversation that filmmakers probably could do with some feedback, but at the same time, festivals don't have that capacity to be held accountable for that. Because, you know, as we've already said, if you give a no to someone and they react badly, if you tell them why, it's, you know, a festival's opening themselves up for a lot more communication that they don't need, because it's a rejected filmmaker, it's not a selected film. So I think generally when a filmmaker kind of starts moaning, saying, oh, my film's not getting selected anywhere, it's things like that you kind of watch it and go, yeah, so it takes a while for the story to hit. Like, is there, you know, why do I have to know who exec produced it before I've even seen a character?
Is that one area of, you know, filmmakers always talk about, you know, you should never think about your audience when you're making your movie. but I think it is the one, in making shorts, I think that there is almost an exception. I do think if you want it to succeed on the festival circuit, you can't be Clint Eastwood, who loves his ridiculously long opening shots that last 3 days. I love Clint Eastwood films, but they are extremely laboured, and
but I think you're right. I will say, like, I think everyone should be thinking of their audience before they even get to the point of finishing the script, because if you're taking the time to write something, you're going to be taking the time to pin your flag to the mast and say, this is a story I wanted to tell. And I think a misconception is that overly earnest or socially led short films do a lot better than the frivolous, the twee, the nice. It's irrelevant, because some people tell a story because they want to cheer someone up, or they tell a story because they've got something so important that maybe people don't know enough about. It can vary, but you still have to know who your audience is, because if you make something and you don't know what kind of audience is going to like it, then you will find it tough on the circuit, because you've got to know, oh, I've made a documentary about human rights. I'm going to go to the human rights focused festivals because that's where my audience is. But it's the same if you have a story where you go, I've got a love story. There are festivals that focus on that, or you can look to festivals that kind of screen more gentle narratives. And I think, knowing your demographic, again, sounds very clinical, it sounds very dry, but if you are in the area of working in film, you are constantly going to be talking about demographics. You're constantly going to be talking about what's the return of interest and audience, and who am I talking to and where can it play. That's part and parcel of it. But if you get it, if you start to begin to understand it from the ground up, why am I writing this story, who's this story speak to, then it makes that journey a lot easier, because you're actually open to going, all right, well, I know it's not for that audience, but it's perfect for that audience. And again, it's all kind of bundled together, like knowing your audience, where you submit, what festivals are suitable, and how much you spend.
The next one on the list is the exact opposite. It's endings. We've had openings, we've now got endings, and this is, I have to admit, this is a personal one for me, because this one drives me mad. I think that the writer in me is always, whenever we watch a film, it's that whole thing. I remember a casting director telling me this years ago, that actors always assume that casting directors want you to fail, but it's the exact opposite. You're desperate, you really, really want somebody brilliant to walk in the room. So don't be afraid, because we're hoping for the best. We're rooting for you, and it's like that with every film we watch. And what what always happens is, I'll start watching a film, and if it's good, I'm kind of going up and up and getting more excited. All this, the acting's good, the writing's good, everything's good, and then so many of the films that we get, it's like a marathon runner, just running towards the line, and just going right before the finish line. And so many films, and as a writer, I can only think, because I do it sometimes. It's that whole thing of not quite sure how to finish this, but somehow they still get made. And I think, I don't know what it is, whether or not a filmmaker thinks, well, nobody's not going to notice, or I think because the short form, there are a lot of films that are just vignettes. There's that sense that, well, it's okay, you don't need an ending. But we do have a lot of, near flawless films, but just the ending just leaves you going, what? You're expecting more, and I don't know what the answer to that is. We had a great film this year, Blood Rule, which is only short. I think it's about 5 minutes long. There's a perfect example of this. Right from the moment it starts, I was just like, oh, you can feel it's quite, it's a drama. I can feel the tension in my chest, and it was coming up to the ending, and it's about somebody who their conditions never explained, but it's possibly autistic. It's a man in a swimming pool who's just doing lengths, and unfortunately gets too close to a little girl, doesn't touch her or anything, but she gets spooked and screams, and he just carries on swimming. And of course, mothers see man, screaming child, and this kind of mob mentality happens. And the film, I'm just watching this, and it is honestly painful to watch. And it was getting to the ending, and I was just thinking, stop here, please stop here, because that would be the perfect time to finish, because I don't want to know what happens next. I want, that's for me to try and decide and he stopped there, and it was just like, and that happens with so many of the films that we watch. You're either, the end credits go and you're like, yes, you've nailed it, or is that just sense of, you've just fumbled the ball at the last second. Otherwise, we would be screening this. And endings, it's, the best filmmakers in the world struggle with endings, to be quite honest, but it is one of those things.
Yeah, and it is, and again, it's a deciding factor, because a programmer has to stand by what they've selected and say to an audience, like, I've picked this, I've curated these films because I want you to hear these stories. And we often get films sent to us where it's very clear it's part of a bigger story, and what we've been presented with is a slither. Now, sometimes it works, sometimes it can really kind of stand on its own 2 feet, and it's a contemplative piece that, where we've been stopped viewing it as an audience is a really good moment for self-reflection, or a consideration of what that character is doing or what they're going to do next. Now, I love it when I watch something and my brain carries on worrying and makes up the story of what happens from where we've been dropped, where we step away. That, for me, is a sign of a really interesting narrative. But the amount of times where, again, we've been in the same position where we watch something, we go, this is really, really great. And then it stops and you're like, I can't do anything with this. I can't tease a programmer with something really, really, really strong that then just suddenly ends with no payoff. Because if we are, as 16 years of experience and knowing lots of different festivals and handling lots of different films, if we are kind of going, okay, a programmer is going to be like, why has this been sent? It's not finished. So therefore it's not going to progress. And I know sometimes, like, look, the film is written 3 times: as a script, in the shoot, and in the edit. And sometimes there's a little bit of miscommunication between some of them. And I think, what we've often found when we've said to someone, look, we really like your film, but it just kind of ends, it's because, the script wasn't ready for when they went to the shoot. So what they did is they just shot what they had. And therefore, when you're in edit, you can only edit with what you've got. So it ends up being this really kind of truncated narrative, especially, like, sometimes you'll see it's a character piece, but the character hasn't been drawn very strongly. So you end up, like, we've seen one recently where it is a cracking drama. It's got grit, it's got brilliant performances, really interesting narrative. But then towards the end, it just focuses on one character and doesn't give us the denouement of their arc. It just suddenly stops. And there's narrative threads that are not tied up that you suddenly go, so hang on a minute, why did they do this? Like, we've been told so much about this, but nothing is mentioned again. And that, you don't want somebody asking those questions. You want somebody to be going, can you imagine what that character did next? Like, they're the kind of questions you want to leave someone with, not with, did I miss something? And, like, sometimes as a team, we'll kind of like go, I've just watched this film, and I'm like, can you just watch it? I'm not going to say anything, just can you watch it and come back to me when you've done it and we can have a chat. And sometimes we're like, I'm not quite sure what this is about. Like, it's just suddenly ended. And sometimes we get stuff that doesn't have credits.
Oh, wow.
And you kind of, and you just kind of go, I know that this must be a work in progress, but you haven't even finished the narrative. So even if you put credits on the end, it's not going to change anything. It is a shame, because some of them have been really, really good. And some of them have just been like, actually, I don't think you could even tweak this, because if you haven't got the footage, what can you do? Like,
it's difficult, because you do see a lot of things where you think, there's the talents there. It's just that, it's the 1%. You've got the 99%. It's just 1%, and you'd have something there. And it's just, I don't know. You probably see it more than I do, but it probably means those films aren't actually going to go anywhere, despite all the talent involved. But which kind of leads on to the next one, which is collaboration. This one is interesting for me, because it was mainly the cinema goers that kind of chose this one. So that's, you know, looking at all the people involved in the process. So the films that tend to not play well at our festival, and probably a lot of festivals, is the one where, you know, they don't have production designer, they don't have a costume designer, they don't have you know, somebody doing the grading, etc. You know, they're often you know, a one-man director, producer, writer team, etc. You know, our People's Choice Award, which is probably one of our most popular screening categories every year, it always sells out, which is the one which is purely selected by local judges. You look, you know, you look at that, and, you know, they're all things where the production design is amazing, the costumes are amazing, and, you know, it's that thing of, if you want a film that's going to play well on the festival circuit, you can't cut corners. You can't get your mate Bob to, you know, just build you something, and, you know, your mum to do the hair and makeup and stuff like that. You know, the really good films that we see and that end up being screened at the festival are the ones that they're shot like a mini feature film. We've got one this year, Mum's Hairpins, that's on the, you know, the images on Film Freeway where you can put stills and stuff. It looks like a, you know, full-size film set with dollies and rails and goodness knows what, and cranes and stuff like that. And I'm not suggesting that every you know, low budget short filmmaker can afford all of that, but there are so many, you know, production designers, costume designers, all these people out there desperate for work, that just take the effort to find them and work with them, rather than just don't bother, because they're the ones that you can always see the difference. You know, the film, you know, when you're watching two shorts back to back, when we're, you know, judging them, when you can always see the one that hasn't, you know, had the full crew and full team involved.
Yeah, it's true, and I think it does stand out, especially when it's kind of poor props, or, you know, just kind of really not thought through costume. And I think that we don't, our rule of thumb is if it's an interesting story, it's an interesting story. So we've taken on stuff that maybe hasn't had a very big budget, but it's funny, and it's, you know, and that film went on to win loads of audience awards, and, you know, it's because it tapped into something that was funny, the presentation, the execution, the story. But, you know, I think it probably cost about 200 quid. But it was 3 people in a flat. But what they did is they kind of went, well, let's make the best of a poor situation, which is, let's focus on script and performances. So you can kind of, it's not like a band-aid, but I think it's very clear when you have cut corners, because, you know, for us, sound is so key that it can just really make or break a film. And like, we've had films sent to us before where they look beautiful, they look absolutely stunning, and the story is interesting, the story is like, you know, something really to get your teeth into. But when you're constantly like turning up the volume to hear what they're saying and then turning it back down because the Atmos sound is too high, you kind of go, well, if we're struggling to watch that on, you know, a TV screen or a laptop, imagine a programmer kind of having to say to the projectionist, like, turn it up here and then turn it down here. It's not going to work. So I think collaboration's key. I think when you have set roles, it helps, because sometimes we might get a writer, director, producer, but they're more accustomed to being a director. So when, you know, producer generally has the keys to a lot of things, and, you know, they know the budget that they're playing with, and they know, you know, the post-production timelines, and they have a bit more know-how in terms of like festival circuit. And sometimes we find ourselves having to say, okay, as the producer on this project, you should know these things. And I think some people, I get it, some people do cater for more than one role because they just need to get stuff done. It's absolutely fine. But I think there comes a point when you kind of go, I need to focus on one thing so I can let somebody else be that support.
Yeah.
And look, when we have clients on our slate, sometimes we have 2 directors, or maybe we have a writer who is also the director, and we have a producer, or we have 2 producers, and so on. So there's no one size fits all, because our point of contact sometimes is not necessarily the producer. It is somebody who's an exec, who's maybe kind of paying for the service and so on. But it's interesting once you start asking for things that you presume people would know that they don't. And I think that's, you have to be honest and
Yes.
kind of like go, first time producing, I don't know what time coded dialogue
Yeah.
list is, or, what's the difference between a log line and a synopsis? And we're like, look, fine, we'll give you help. But it's also good to know what your role's supposed to be, especially on a short, because that's where you cut your teeth, really.
Yeah.
And we do find that, I think we've got a lot of writer directors because they've got a script that they want to make, and that makes sense. But then actually we've had an influx of the writer being separate from the director and from the producer, which actually, if anything, is quite nice, because it means that you can have a different level of, not discouraging writers, because I'm from a writing background as well, but it means that you can have a different level of discussion when a film is turned down.
Yeah.
Because sometimes the feedback is, look, the script just isn't as strong as we would like. It's easier to say that to a director who hasn't written the script than who has, because you've got a double-edged, rejection. So yeah, I do think that, collaboration is key, but kind of making it crystal clear, because sometimes there's, confusion about who's supposed to be doing what. That can be another kind of tricky situation.
Yeah. The next one on our list is this is my personal biggie, is communication or lack of.
Oh man.
It's a big thing on the Film Festival Alliance. I noticed a lot of festival directors, worrying that they're essentially having to stalk filmmakers. You might understand this better than I do. I don't quite understand what regularly happens. It happens every year. Is a filmmaker will submit their film. They'll often submit it with a lovely covering letter, telling you all about their film and why they want to be in your festival, and then they vanish off the face of the planet.
I know.
And you select their film, and we've actually got quite a pertinent story to that. So in our first year, that happened, and somebody actually won an award, and we got the film from them, and because we won't screen a film unless we've got you're okay, we've still got the authority. It hasn't got distribution or anything like that. So we got the film from them, and then after that there was no more communication. We tried everything, email, I think stalked them on, they had a Vimeo account, everything. They won an award, and it's still it's in a box somewhere, because we couldn't even get them to tell us where to send it. So we had something very similar happen again this year. And we just eventually had to take an executive decision that we've got the film, but after half a dozen emails, after contacting them in various ways, we even left my wife. She's always very humble about it, but she's very good at languages. So she spoke in French on somebody's voicemail somewhere. She's not convinced it was very good French, but I think it was perfect. So we even left and nothing. So eventually we decided, well, that we can't communicate with them. They were scheduled to win an award, and we just thought we're going to have the same as the first year. So we decided to take that award away, and it's gone to the next person who's just as deserving. But that's kind of the as far as not communicating goes. Somebody was going to win an award, now isn't an award, and
I think it's several things, and I don't think it's one issue. I think it's several things. And I think, first of all, when you use a submission platform, and we've had issues with submission platforms before where, email correspondence hasn't come through from the festival, but we've had notification that we've had selections.
Right.
So what that's meant is that we as a company have had to reach out to those festivals and say, hey, we know we've got selections with you, but we haven't had any emails. Can tell us what you need from us, because we want to get it in a timely manner. Now we effectively as a company sit in between filmmaker and festival, and we do the communication. So when a festival says we want to screen the film, we're like, great, here's everything you need straight away. And we're known for that, speedy delivery. So when a festival cannot get hold of a filmmaker, it frustrates me, because that festival really wants to screen your film. And I know programmers who literally hunt people down on Facebook, or go via a friend of a friend to say, look, can you just tell this person to read their emails? And I think it's partially an issue with the submission platforms, because then they send out a lot of emails, so it might be going to junk, it might be filtered, it might be on a blacklist or whatever. But also sometimes people don't actually fill in the information that is needed to send those emails out via a submission platform. So you'll find that sometimes a filmmaker has put contact information on there somewhere, but it's not in the necessarily the correct place for those emails to be filtered out. Then I think filmmakers get a little bit snowblind when it comes to emails, because if a festival is going to send out selections via a submission platform, those emails all look the same. So if they've got a lot of rejection, chances are they're just going to go, oh, it's another one from that platform, it's a rejection, and they don't read it. We've had that with clients where we forward stuff on and we've actually had to say to them, you do realize this is a selection, like we haven't heard anything from you. Like we get it as well in a lesser form. And I think that is the process of submissions is really slow. So I think filmmakers will do a glut of submissions and then forget about it. And then they just kind of presume it's all going to be no's. So when it comes through, they don't really kind of take time to look at it and be really kind of involved with the information that's being presented. What we've tried to say to everyone now is, at this particular point in time, because of festivals having to pivot to be an online version of themselves, the communication has upped between filmmaker and festival. And it should be kind of embraced, because that's all we've ever wanted, is there for there to be more communication between filmmaker and festival and vice versa. And other reasons, I don't mean to tar everyone with the same brush. It's not the same for every filmmaker, but sometimes they are just very tardy. Like we kind of pull our hair out sometimes, because we're like, you've asked us to do a thing, we've done the thing, we need your say so, you haven't come back to us. And I get it, life gets in the way, there's a pandemic going on, but what I found is, because there's a pandemic going on, people are sitting on their inboxes a lot more.
Yeah, the pandemic turned into quite a useful excuse as well, though.
Yeah.
I haven't been able to reply because the pandemic. What? That doesn't actually make much sense. But
no. So I will say, like, I wish, the one thing I always say to filmmakers that aren't being represented by us is just read everything. It may be hard to read a lot of rejection, but you never know. A lot of festivals will sometimes send a rejection out, but actually say, look, here's a fee waiver for the next year. Or, we really liked your film, we'd like to consider it for another, branch of our festival later in the year. But it's reliant on you reading and actually kind of understanding and possibly asking questions. That's fine. Absolutely. But so I feel the pain, and I don't know why filmmakers do it.
I do sometimes wonder whether or not, because the other side of it is the fact that there are a couple of agencies out there, as we know, that do kind of just they scoop up films from lots of filmmakers and represent them, and then just fire them out to a lot of festivals. And if those films are selected, then those agencies kind of bat you on to the filmmaker, who doesn't, I don't think knows anything about your festival, doesn't know you've been submitted. So it's like this sudden surprise to them. We had one absolutely ridiculous this year where an agency submitted something that we wanted to select. The agency didn't get back to us. So we tried to hunt down all of anybody in the credits, and the only person in the credits whose details we could find anywhere was, I think it was the costume and makeup, maybe. So I messaged her, and because it was so random, her being messaged, I then got the producer contacted me, but I had the copied message where she'd actually asked the producer, "What's going on here? Is this a scam?" Which I can completely understand, because why on earth would a film festival be contacting her? But it is bonkers sometimes. And I think as a film festival, and I think it's probably similar for most film festivals, and once again, see this with a lot of the people on Film Festival Alliance, there is that sense of you almost feel sometimes you almost feel like a connection with some of these films. Some of these films I've sent through to the judges saying, I love this is brilliant, I want to meet the filmmaker and put my arm around them and shake their hands and say, wow, this is amazing. And then to get absolutely no communication, it's almost heartbreaking. It's like a really bad date. So that level of lack of communication, it's just
it's
something
frustrating.
that it just makes it very difficult. And the fact that everything's on very tight time frames. The moment your announcements come out, just for the nature of the industry, you don't have long before you have to put your program together, before you have to have the films and start doing tech runs and stuff. So when people take so long to actually get back to you, it becomes very difficult. And this year, once again, to be fair, I think most festivals do this. You end up losing a couple of films just because you don't hear from people. We lost 2 films this year just because we'd selected them and then never heard at all, even for a request for a screening copy. So it's odd. But yeah, that is that is one of the probably the biggie for us. Sorry, my mouse has just died, so I can't see my list anymore. Here we go. There we go. Right, fantastic. Good. So the next one is probably ties in with the opening and closing. It's editing and length, which is always the perennial kind of short debate. So kind of the only extra comments that I can add to that is the fact that yes, you're probably randomly choosing a statistic off the top of my head, probably 80% of the films we receive, I'd say, it could do with some editing. And as a filmmaker myself, I know that, I present something, I don't want anybody to touch it, but invariably, yes, there is a little bit of tinkering that can be done. But the other thing as well is we're seeing a lot more like 30-minute films. Seems to be far more common now than when we first started out. And the thing about a 30-minute film is, even if it's brilliant, that's 3 10-minute films or whatever that I'm losing to screen that. So it's a real difficult decision. So you've got to be better than 3 other films for me to be able to program you.
Yeah, it's hard because there's no magic running time.
No.
And I think the slight confusion is, by Academy ruling, anything 40 minutes and under is considered a short film. Now, I wouldn't advise to go out and make a 40-minute short film, because a programmer generally has about 90 minutes to schedule for. So you would be asking them to eat up most of their program. Now, there's a slight variation where if you are working in documentary, it's quite common for it to be a 40-minute short, because documentary specific festivals can group kind of content by theme or by conflicts or contrasts. But every festival is going to be really, really different. There are even some academy affiliated festivals out there that stipulate we don't want anything more than 30. So it's not even a hard fast rule. There are festivals. Cannes is a really good one, because we always get filmmakers going, I really want to submit to Cannes, and you go, you really don't know anything about Cannes taste, but also you're giving me a 25-minute film, you can't submit anything more than 15 to Cannes. So that's how it can actually be people looking at the prestige of the festival over the actual kind of eligibility criteria. I think there are festivals out there that don't want anything more than 10 minutes or 7 minutes, 15 or 20 or 30, and some festivals are being very upfront by saying, look, we accept up to 30 minutes, but we prefer under 20. And that's because they want to program as many pieces as they can. I think whenever we get something sent to us, if we have a comment about running time, again, we realize that people come to us at different stages. They might be in a work in progress, they might be kind of already finished and picture locked but happy to make amendments, or they might be in a position where they've already started submissions, they cannot edit anymore because they just don't have that connection with the editor anymore or the post-production house. So what we tend to do is, if there's something that we feel is hindering a story or an overall production, we will mention it, but we kind of say to them, you may be in a position where you can't amend this. So what we're saying is we're just flagging it up, because it could be that a programmer really likes this, but they actually kind of go, there's a really flabby bit in the middle which doesn't quite add anything, it kind of detracts away from it. But we never kind of say to people, your film has to be under 15 minutes, because some of the brilliant stories we've had have been like 22 minutes,
Yep.
and that's fine. All it means is that, you know, you can't submit to Cannes, or you can't submit to, you know, other festivals that want 15 minutes and under. So it's important to consider when you're going to go on the circuit, because I can probably guarantee that there will be a filmmaker who really wants to submit to somewhere, but now they can't, because their film is a different length. And what I really would advise against is having different cuts of films to submit to festivals, because
we see that quite regularly.
Yeah, my rule of thumb is, if you've edited your film just for that particular festival, why is your film not that length to begin with? Like, if you're telling me you can do it and you've done it and you're happy for it to be screened like that, then go with that one. Don't go with 2 different cuts, because it's pointless, and it actually undervalues the work, because you actually you're effectively saying, I've made this because I want to be submitted here. And that really detracts away from the strength of your film. It should be, if it works that length and it doesn't kind of crucify narrative or execution, have it the shorter length. That's the best way to go.
It's the penultimate one, you'll be glad to know. This is it's listed as single take films. That's what the judges kind of put it down as. But I'm going to put it under the heading of kind of anything technically gimmicky or whatever. We get so many submissions from filmmakers who are selling, or pitching the film to us on the basis of, it's incredible, I've managed to shoot a short film in one take. And if that's all you've got, then you don't really have anything, because we get so many of those films. And it's a bit like, it's why, is that kind of under that heading, I would almost, but not quite, so I'd put like COVID films as well, because we've had like 50 COVID films this year, and a lot of them, they're selling themselves on the fact that, the quality's not great, I'm not an actor, I'm a filmmaker, but I'm in it, but isn't it amazing that I've managed to do this under these conditions? And it is, but we still have a bar that we're trying to hit in terms of quality. And yes, it's good to, single take films, kind of, we screened a film last year, Last Call, which is it's a feature length film, but it's 2 single takes running side by side, 2 sides of the film. So it's like, ever since that, it's like any other single take film, it's like, just watch this.
I would say, like, we've had a few come our way, and we do look after. We've got one, actually no, we possibly got 2, but we've taken them on not because they're single take, but they're actually quite interesting.
Exactly. Like, if there's a story and they're well made, then
I think if you are trying to sell a film or pitch a film on the technical aspect or the kind of excuses, this film's not talking for itself. And I think, we've seen stuff where we've had an increase in COVID films, but what I would say is that the majority of these films don't mention COVID. They have the lockdown aspect as a texture in the landscape, but it's not, you could play them pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, they'll still work. It's just, the limitations that are enforced on it. We have seen a lot more of screen-on-screen films. So, somebody presenting through Zoom or through FaceTime or, something, or Skype, which I think you have to do something truly special with it for it to kind of really land with a festival. But I think, every festival is going to vary, because, some have a COVID category and some don't.
Exactly. I think it's probably the same with anything on this list. This is very much us specific. It involves some conversation with other festivals. So there are certain things that will be, carry across all festivals. But I think that's just something where, there are technically minded festivals, and we're not. We're just about, telling great stories and great films. So if we do get a film, the COVID was something we took the decision quite early on. We were thinking, so our closing deadline was in July, festival in October. We were thinking, is everybody really going to want to be sitting in a dark cinema wearing a mask in October, watching films about the apocalypse they're currently experiencing? So we did genuinely receive some good ones, but it was part a creative decision, but there were a lot that were purely technical films, and creatively there wasn't a great deal to them. Onto the last one, which happens to be my favourite, and this is mine. So we've got 9 from the judges. This is just me because I'm the only one who sees these, and this is rejection responses. Rejection responses are my favourite because they, we were talking about this earlier, but I can read some. I've got some of them that we've been sent. I didn't ask for a standard email rejection. Can you at least give me the courtesy of some feedback? I don't know. No, I can't. Basically, I don't have the time, and it's I'm the one who would give that feedback, and I can't give individual emails to 1,000 people. I've already won 27 awards, so would like an explanation why you didn't deem it good enough for your festival. Did you even watch my film? I doubt you even watched it. We kind of consider ourselves like it's slightly cheesy, but like a family festival. We like to keep in touch with people and always jokingly say to people, pop round for Christmas. And, I get something like that. It's like, I don't want you coming around for Christmas. My favourite of all time is, it was a mistake submitting to your festival. I've never even heard of it. If you'd selected me, I wouldn't have let you show my film anyway. Like, burn.
I think it goes back to this arrogance thing. I do honestly think that some filmmakers are so frustrated that their tipping point is angled towards the festival. Like any festival sending a rejection, it might be like the straw that broke the camel's back, and it's a filmmaker just kind of lashing out. We've had it before where we send rejections onto a filmmaker and they just kind of just snap. They just kind of they kind of get so frustrated, and they're like, I really don't understand this, that I'm feeling really shit, and I think my film's terrible, and blah blah blah. And we kind of take the time to sit with them and kind of go through it and just say, look, a lot of these festivals are having to turn down films that they really actually do like, and it's not necessarily because you've been turned down because you're bad. And they get it, and they always kind of go, yeah, sorry, it's just I've had a really bad day, or I've had a really bad week. This was the 10th rejection in a row. I think the ego is fragile, so how that is presented to a filmmaker is very, very hard. Yes, it's a standard rejection letter, but that's because I don't think filmmakers quite understand that if you get like 1,000 submissions or more, nobody is going to be able to provide that feedback. It will say somewhere in the rules and regulations, we do not provide feedback. So it's always like it again sounds really cut and dry, but reverting back to rules and regulations, you will see if a festival has said, you can ask us for feedback, but you probably won't get it for a few months after the festival, because hey, we're running a festival and we're going to spend time with the selected films rather than the films that we've had to turn down. I think some filmmakers are probably not best suited to being a filmmaker in a competitive sense. Some filmmakers learn. We have had filmmakers who have had who we've gone on a journey with, who maybe were a little bit more kind of abrasive at the beginning and have actually kind of earned their stripes through being burnt, through being happy about the selections, to understanding the process. And we have filmmakers that approach a circuit in a kind of whatever happens, happens. If I get a selection, great. If I get a rejection, next one, let's go on. And they're the filmmakers that you've got the right approach, not being too focused on the negatives. Because the other thing I will say is, spinning off of the rejection, when a filmmaker gets a selection, they never have that response with such gusto. They'll shout about the rejections, and when they get the selection, they're like, great, but when's the next one?
Yes.
And you're like, focus on the one you've got, because it's hard enough getting those selections. It's a tough circuit at the best of times. It used to be getting a selection was easier, winning the awards was the hard part. Now getting the selection is pretty much the award, because it's so oversubscribed. So we always kind of say to filmmakers, look, holler and scream about the rejections, just don't do it to the festival, because what good is it going to do you? It's not going to do, you might feel great for 5 minutes, but the festival is not going to forget that.
No.
And yeah.
The flip side of that, the last one that I have is actually, and I still remember it, is this last year, I think this was last year, a filmmaker who'd won at Sundance in the same year, who then submitted that film to us, wasn't selected. And their response was, "Thank you so much for the message. I wish you every success with this year's festival. Will definitely submit with my next film." So that is now somebody who wasn't selected, who I'm now actively watching what they're doing.
Yeah.
Because the moment they make another film, I'm going to get in touch with them and say, I'd love you to submit. And
yeah, it's communications. And nothing ever kind of happens overnight. And and I would say, like, off the back of the communication element as well, if you've been selected, talk to the festival, because they are rooting for you. They have selected you. They want to screen your film, so therefore they're championing you. The least you can do is champion them back.
Yeah, because there is, I don't know whether people even realize this, but you get a sense of pride. It's now, I feel pride whenever I see any films that we've screened going off and doing well, and things, and just seeing Will in an advert, Will Kenning in an advert, it's like, oh wow. So it's just these little things. So I think filmmakers probably don't realize that festivals do, it does, it feels slightly family like. And
and also, like, when you get to that point when you do put your film online, or it is available on a VOD, if you're an alumni of a festival, they are willing to shout out. They are a marketing tool. They are somebody to slap you on the back and push you up a little bit and kind of say to other people, hey, by the way, this filmmaker we supported 1-2 years ago, whatever, has now made a feature, or their next short is online, or they've just been signed to this agent. And it's kind of we're all kind of cheerleaders for each other, but it's understanding how that works and how it can actually filter into not just the selection, but in the future, and actually kind of for future projects.
It's that whole thing of wanting each other to succeed, because it is such a competitive industry and process that if there's anything that everybody can do to kind of help each other and push each other on, well, that's it.